everyone, I am Zazubaar, and I am coming to you from very snowy and cold Long Island tonight, as there's a blizzard going on outside. It's snowing. It's going to be like 12 inches of snow, which is fucking crazy for Long Island at this time of year, so that's fucking nuts, and it's freezing outside, and I don't want to go outside. Not that I go outside anyway, but now at least I have an excuse to sit inside and be lazy. But because it's so cold and wet and dreary outside, as the snow falls and the temperature drops and it becomes a lot more to shovel in the morning, I wanted to come at you guys with a movie review. Well, actually kind of several movie reviews. A movie franchise review, if you will, that makes us all at home think of the warm, sunny, sexy side of the United States. That very far off, magical, wonderful place of California. Very specifically, a very romanticized portion of California that everybody considers to be the closest thing to heaven on earth. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am of course talking about Beverly Hills. And what is the movie franchise I am going to be reviewing connected to Beverly Hills? Why, of course, Beverly Hills 90210, clearly the pinnacle of fictional narrative, a show that I have been a fan of for years. Ha! No, fuck you, I hate that show. No, today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go back to the 80s, to the time of violent, curse-filled action movies that we were still allowed to watch as children back then before all this watered-down crap came our way. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here to talk about the Beverly Hills Cop movies, and the heat is on. So believe it or not, I actually don't have a lot of nostalgia for the Beverly Hills Cops movies. Not cops, though there are Beverly Hills Cops. For the Beverly Hills Cop movies, because I really never saw them as a kid or as a young teenager or whatever age you'd think I would see the Beverly Hills Cop movies at. I knew of them. It was a franchise that had been spoken about, you know, through the internet and through television. When you watch stuff about Eddie Murphy's career, it always comes up. But I never actually sat down and watched the Beverly Hills Cop movies. No particular reason why. I've just never had the chance or the interest to really sit down and get into that franchise. But recently I was listening to a podcast on the Smodcast network, you know, the Kevin Smith podcast, and a podcast that Kevin Smith is not actually in, but it's one that's on his network called Phoebe, which stands for Four Eyes and Beard. And on that podcast, two guys, Matt Myra and Scott Mosier, sat down and did a commentary track on, strangely enough, Beverly Hills Cop 3. I have no idea why, but they did a commentary track on Beverly Hills Cop 3, and not knowing much about Beverly Hills Cop, I just listened to it without watching the movie, which they said they would try and make it accessible to that, so it seemed okay to me to watch it to listen to it without the movie. So I listened to it, and they're talking about Beverly Hills Cop 3, and they keep referring back to the first two movies and how much better they are, how original they are, how funny they are. And I just kept thinking, these movies sound awesome. I gotta go back and watch Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2, because they sound really good. You know, they got all the big names attached to them. You got fucking Eddie Murphy as Axel Foley. You've got Tony Scott directing the second one. There's a lot of, you know, connections between stuff that I do like and Beverly Hills Cop. So it only seemed natural for me to go back and watch the first two and maybe muster through 3. So the past 2 days, that's what I decided to do. All 3 movies are on Netflix, Beverly Hills Cop 1, 2, and 3. So I said, fuck it, I got nothing to do. I'm on Christmas vacation from school. I'll fucking watch Beverly Hills Cop 1, 2, and 3. So that's what I did. I watched Beverly Hills Cop 2, and sat through Beverly Hills Cop 3. And now, since these movies have been on my mind for the past couple of days, I figured, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna talk about it. I'm gonna do a review on these 3 movies. Originally, I was thinking of just bringing the movies up on a podcast that I do called The Demons from Outer Space with my friend Dylan McCandless, which we're gonna record later tonight, so look for that in the upcoming days. But I texted Dylan about it, and he said that he hadn't seen the Beverly Hills Cop movies in years and probably wouldn't remember much. So I was like, you know what? There's other stuff we can talk about on that show aside from Beverly Hills Cop. So fuck it. I'm just going to do so. I'll do the review on my own. I'm going to talk about these movies in a review on my own. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to dig into the Beverly Hills Cop franchise. So not being very familiar with these movies, I wasn't really sure what to expect going into Beverly Hills Cop 1, 2, and 3. I knew they were kind of a very indicative of the 80s mix of action and comedy. Something like you'd see in Lethal Weapon or Ghostbusters. Something along those lines, a very 80s action kind of feel. It's rated R because back then action movies were allowed to be rated R, and they didn't have to be marketed to teenagers because teenagers could fucking sneak in, but that's not cool anymore. So it's very indicative of that time period, and I love a lot of movies from that time period. Die Hard is one of my favorite action movies. And this movie is a lot more serious than Die Hard. I'm sorry, that was wrong. It's a lot less serious than Die Hard is, but it still definitely has the feel of something like Die Hard. And going into them, I wasn't really sure what to expect in terms of like the character of Axel Foley. Like Axel Foley was one of those characters you always hear about as one of these icons of action comedy, but I didn't know what he was supposed to be or his character or his history or whatever. I just kind of jumped in. And boy, is that the best way to watch Beverly Hills Cop, because it is insanely supported by the character of Axel Foley, and even more so, Eddie Murphy's performance. The reason why these movies work, the reason why they are so loved, why Axel Foley is a character that everybody points to as like, oh, that guy's awesome, is Eddie Murphy's performance. I've heard quotes by directors like John Landis, who directed Beverly Hills Cop 3, but we won't hold him to that, speak about how really poor the script was for the first Beverly Hills Cop before Eddie Murphy got involved. And he claims that the only reason why that movie did well and why that character became so popular was because of Eddie Murphy's performance. And if you watch the first movie, I totally agree with him. Without Eddie Murphy, or without having Eddie Murphy in mind as the cast, that movie does not work as well as it does. Beverly Hills Cop really supports itself on Eddie Murphy's performance. It's a lot of the humor, I think, is gone without Eddie Murphy's performance and without the clear improv that he does with a lot of the cast and on his own in the movie. My favorite example of this, in terms of clearly non-improvised scenes, is where Axel Foley, and spoilers, by the way, for those of you who haven't seen the Beverly Hills Cop movies, for the best example of this, Axel Foley is on a stakeout, and he goes to this guy's house who he thinks is the guy who ordered his friend back in Detroit dead. And he sits outside this house, he's got his car there, but he's not supposed to be doing this because he's not from Beverly Hills. For those of you who don't know the premise of Beverly Hills Cop, basically, Axel Foley is a detective from Detroit. He's extremely young, extremely rebellious, he's very sarcastic, he's a wise ass, and he constantly breaks the rules and does things he's not supposed to do. And things happen back in Detroit, and one of his friends gets killed for some reason. We're not sure why. But Axel Foley, being the rebellious young guy that he is, despite his chief, Inspector Todd's, misgivings about it, goes after the guys who he thinks killed his friend. And this leads him to Beverly Hills. So he's not... See, here's the thing. The title is really misleading because Beverly Hills Cop, it's like he's not a cop from Beverly Hills. So that title is insanely misleading. Like, oh, it's going to be about a cop from Beverly Hills. And before I found out about Beverly Hills Cop, that's what I thought it was about. I thought it was about a guy who was a cop in Beverly Hills and what that entails. What is a cop from Beverly Hills like? Which that is definitely what the movie is about, but I always thought that Eddie Murphy was supposed to be the representation of this is what a Beverly Hills Cop is like, and actually it's the opposite. He's the complete opposite of cops from Beverly Hills. So Axel Foley goes to the Beverly Hills to try and find his friend's killer, and it's a very much so a fish out of water story. It's it's all upscale, modern, very high class, very conservative, very white, if I may say, looking area, and the police force there is very indicative of that. It's extremely high tech. The crime rate is fairly balanced. It's not explosive or excessively violent. And you can definitely see that with the kind of crimes that Axel gets wrapped up in Beverly Hills when he goes there. And it's all kind of covert and very high-class kind of crime. As opposed to Detroit, where fucking the opening of the movie, Axel Foley is ripping through the streets of Detroit in a truck with gunfire going off. And he's pretending to be a criminal. And he even says in one scene that, oh, you guys should go back to Detroit where we have nice, very consistent street crime. Very violent street crime. And that's something that they do a very clear distinction of, and where I think the movie... And I'll say this about the whole franchise. Beverly Hills Cop and Beverly Hills Cop 2 are shot beautifully. They are beautiful movies. And that they're very much so a time capsule of how action movies in the 80s were shot, and how good action movies in the 80s were shot. Very bright, very, very colorful, very nice to look at. You can tell everything that's going on. You get wrapped up in the scenery. Everything is very, very aesthetically pleasing. Excuse me. Me no speak the English tonight. And it's very indicative of that. It's always very pretty to look at, and that's not necessarily referring to what's being shot being pretty. What I mean is that the way it's shot is very pretty, because the whole point of Axel Foley being a fish out of water is that Detroit is a shithole. And you look at this and you look at fucking RoboCop, and it's very easy to see why. It's chop shops and automobile factories and mills and all this very low-key pollution pumping out shitty ass urbanization, and the visual palette definitely expresses that. And it's one of those examples of an unpleasing place being pleasing to look at, because just like if you watch the Chris Nolan Batman movies, or even the first Tim Burton one, Gotham is very, very dark and grimy and fucking gothic looking, but it's pretty to look at. You get wrapped up in that darkness. Or The Crow is a good example of that. And Detroit in this movie and in the next movie are also very indicative of that. We'll get to Beverly Hills Cop 3 in a little bit. And then when you compare that to when Axel gets to Beverly Hills, it's all pretty and colorful and all this stuff. And the way it's shot on both ends, allows you to experience both visual palettes and both feels of both of those cities. So that's what makes them so well shot. And partially why fucking Beverly Hills Cop 3 is so boring, because it all looks the same. Detroit and Beverly Hills both look the same in Beverly Hills Cop 3, which is a problem. And it's even funnier because fucking half of Beverly Hills Cop 3 takes place at a fucking amusement park. And the way it's shot, you couldn't even tell, like, oh, we're not in Detroit right now. But we'll get to Beverly Hills Cop 3. I want to praise the first two movies first for turning me into a Beverly Hills Cop fan. Okay, so back to my point earlier. Why these movies work and why Beverly Hills Cop is such a big success thanks to Eddie Murphy and thanks to the character of Axel Foley. So, again, Axel's on a stakeout. He's not supposed to be, because he's not a Beverly Hills Cop. He's a Detroit cop. He's on vacation, looking for his friend's killer, and nobody wants him there. Nobody wants him near this case. Axel the Beverly Hills Police Department, due to Axel disturbing the peace, so to speak, trying to find his friend's killer earlier in the movie, has two cops tailing Axel. But Axel is extraordinarily clever at getting away from people who are pursuing him, and he's very, very clever, and very, 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 what's the word? Charming and enthusiastic, and charismatic is the word I was looking for. And earlier in the movie, he was able to ditch the two cops who were tailing him, Rosewood and, what's the other one's name? The older cop, the sergeant. And he was able to do that by fucking sticking bananas in their tailpipe and distracting them with food and all that. He's an extremely likable character. You want to see what he does. And all this stuff is very funny thanks to the way Eddie Murphy is doing it. The way Eddie Murphy portrays Axel Foley going about doing these extraordinarily clever things, it really gets you wrapped up into the story and in his character, so you care about what's going on. The scenes where the humor is mainly leaning on the script is where it's not funny, as I said earlier, or where it kind of falls flat, I suppose is a better way to put it. It's not that it's, stupid, but it just kind of falls flat. And the best example of this is the stakeout. Axel Foley gets these two... The way he's going to get rid of these two cops is by distracting them. So he's like, "Oh, guys, come over here. If you're going to follow me, we might as well do this thing together." So the two cops go, "Mr. Foley, why are you... It looks like you're on a stakeout." He's like, "Stakeout? Nah, I'm on a picnic. This is a picnic area." He's pulling out food and clothes, and it's a funny line in theory, but it all leans on the delivery, and in that particular instance, Eddie Murphy does not deliver on the delivery. But, it's fun because he does it the rest of the movie, but because his delivery fell flat in that one scene, the whole thing falls flat. And that the script alone is not enough to carry the humor. And I think that that's where you can see both the strengths of Beverly Hills Cop, but also the weaknesses. The strength being Eddie Murphy, and the weakness being, taking away all of the very specific things that make it Beverly Hills Cop. Eddie Murphy, Axel Foley, the score, and I should have looked up the music, the guy who did the music score, but it's really, really upbeat and gets you wrapped up in what's going on. Very fitting for the film. Axel Foley's theme is awesome. It's an awesome theme. But you take away all those things, and you take away Axel Foley's style, it is incredibly generic. It's a generic cop story. That's all it is if you take away all those very specific things that make it Beverly Hills Cop and make it fun. Taking away all those things leads to a very generic cop movie that's not very funny. Every other cast member is trying to make you laugh, but really not succeeding in it. Everything leans on Eddie Murphy, on Axel Foley, and on the style. So you take away all those things, it's a generic cop movie. So the scenes that Eddie Murphy's not in, they're not as fun. The only thing that keeps you wrapped up in them is the fact that it's building into the plot that Eddie Murphy has gotten you engaged in, thanks to Axel Foley. So that's where the movie's kind of... That's where the movie, again, they show their strength, but they also show their weaknesses. And really, all we've got going for us is this character and the guy playing him. So you've got to bear that in mind going into it, not expecting an extraordinarily well done plot. You got to go into it thinking you're going to get a basic cop story, a basic, not even a revenge flick, but just a basic cop story that, with Eddie Murphy playing the cop, and he plays an extraordinarily charismatic and likable cop. So it's thankful that he has as much screen time as he does. So, that being said, does the first movie hold up as a good action movie? Definitely, but without Axel Foley, they probably wouldn't. That being said, there are definitely things about the movie that work, subtracting it from Axel Foley. In that the action, aside from being shot really well, the action is fairly entertaining. But again, I wonder how much of it is the to be credited to just the filmmakers and not to the presence of Axel Foley. And I'll explain this by saying this. Seeing Axel Foley do these awesome, like, street kind of, like, you know, rolls and jumps and, you know, kind of these cool gun moves is really cool to look at and really fun to watch, and it's very fast-paced. But I don't know if the action aside from that holds up. I think the positive there is that it's very well shot 80s action. You've got blood everywhere, you've got gunfire, you've got smoke, you've got pieces of debris getting flown everywhere. And it's good 80s action, but I think what makes it so good is the presence of Axel Foley. And, you know, he's fun to watch. Even when he's not being funny, he's just fucking going around blowing people away and jumping out of windows and jumping over fences and rolling and grabbing his gun and shooting some fucker in the balls. So, you know, even without the comedy, it still holds because of Axel Foley. But there are definitely moments that he's not in that also hold up because of the action. There's this shot where Billy Rosewood and Tarek, I don't know, the other guy, the bald one, and they're both likable too, but Rosewood especially is a little bit kind of like, he's hard to get, he's a little bit awkward. I know that's supposed to be kind of the point, that's what's supposed to be making him funny. And Judge Reinhold is doing his best to make that funny, but again, it's the delivery that kills on stuff like this, and he's not giving it the right delivery. So that's what makes that role lacking. The other one, and I keep forgetting, the sergeant, he is extremely likable, fun to watch, but again, even at some points, the delivery falls flat, and this is more so than Axel Foley's. At some points, his delivery falls flat, and he becomes kind of boring. But that being said, there's the scene where those two guys and Axel raid the mansion is extremely entertaining, because you just see fucking Axel and these two guys shotgunning fucking walls and blowing apart these guys with machine guns. And it's all well shot and all fun to watch. And there's one point, and this is one of the moments that are funny even without Eddie Murphy, is where Rosewood and the other guy are behind some cover, and Rosewood gets up, presumably to shoot the people shooting at them, but instead of shooting them, he holds up his badge, because I guess the idea is they were about to reload, and Rosewood was going to take this opportunity to try and arrest them. So he gets his badge out, he holds it up and holds up his gun and goes, "Put down your guns, police!" And they just start shooting at him again. And the other guy is like, "You do that again, I'll shoot you myself." It's a really funny scene. And I feel like it's moments like that that are definitely show that this is a good action flick, even subtracting Eddie Murphy. But again, that's a scene out of many, and most of the movie is definitely held up by Eddie Murphy and by Axel Foley. But the first Beverly Hills Cop, insanely entertaining. I love the crap out of it. I love the music score. I love the style. I love the 80s-ness of it. It's just a damn good action flick. Insanely entertaining. And when you watch that first movie, you keep saying to yourself, "Oh my god, I would love to watch a weekly Axel Foley's TV series." Just because of how charismatic and how likable the guy is. So that's something that, you know, definitely stuck out to me watching it for the first time. And then you get to Beverly Hills Cop 2, and you're like, "Oh my god, this is better than the first movie," for the most part. Beverly Hills Cop 2 is weird, because the first movie is very small. It's a lot smaller in scale than the second one. It's an 80s action flick, but it's not Die Hard with a vengeance. It's just kind of a low-key guns and cops and robbers kind of situation. And it's well done for that, but it's small. It's kind of low-key. Clearly not gigantic budget. So the shootouts and the gunplay are not gigantic. There's no enormous stunts. And the enormous stunts that are there are mostly at the beginning. It's that one giant car chase, and then there aren't a lot of them for the rest of the movie. But then you get to Beverly Hills Cop 2, and they get a director, Tony Scott, as I said earlier, big-time 80s action director. He made Top Gun. He made a bunch of, very, well-received action films of the time, very high-grossing. And he takes this character in this universe and says, I am going to make an awesome action movie that features Axel Foley. And he makes a very, very good sequel to the first one that directly connects back, that makes sense. The plot has to involve Axel Foley, and it just makes sense for that universe and that character. And then he takes that and he turns it into a spectacle. Beverly Hills Cop 2 is, if anything, a spectacle. Because, there's car chases, there's wider gunplay. The actual crime going on in Beverly Hills Cop 2 also supports that. It's elaborate robbery this time as just being opposed to drug smuggling. And you get to see all the robberies, and it's, dozens of robbers breaking into these very tight places to break into with guns and armor on, and it's just bigger. And when you throw in this bigger scale, the much more elaborate action, and the clearly more interesting cop story, you get one hell of a movie. And then on top of that, you have Axel Foley in there, and you get a really, really good 80s action flick. A fantastic one at that. And it's all thanks to Tony, in my opinion, all thanks to Tony Scott's direction, mixed in with Eddie Murphy's now well-refined performance as Axel Foley. And now the script knows how to write Axel Foley. Now that they know Eddie Murphy and they know his personality and they know how this fucking character should work, it's like, let's give them more of that. And one of the big things, and I should have mentioned this while talking about the first movie, is that what Axel Foley is really good at, that really no other cop character has done, is the comedy comes from his elaborate lies. His lies that allow him to get undercover into places and find out the information he wants to find out without killing anyone, without breaking in, without shooting anybody. That comes later. And in the first movie, that's what made him so unique. That's what made it work that well, was his ability to do that. Just walk into a room and immediately establish control of the room when previously he was the least dominant in the room, just thanks to his elaborate lying. And Beverly Hills Cop 2 takes that and says, alright, now let's throw in the more elaborate action. And you get a good mix of both. I think my favorite scene in terms of Axel Foley using these elaborate lies to get at what he wants to get at, and it's funny because it's the most pointless. It's easily the most pointless, but it's definitely the best. Axel Foley is looking for a place to stay. In the first movie, he spent hundreds of dollars staying in a Beverly Hills... Well, the Beverly Hills Police Department did, but still. He stayed at this really expensive hotel. And they didn't really get a ton of comedy mileage out of it, though he did do another elaborate lie in order to get into that hotel. But this one's even better. So Axel Foley's driving around looking for a place to stay, and he comes across this house that's under construction. The owners are out of town for a week, and he's only going to be there for 3 days. So Axel Foley gets out of the car, pulls out his badge, and goes, "Hi, I'm Axel Foley, Beverly Hills building inspector," and convinces the foreman of these workers that what they're doing is wrong. That the plans that they're using to build this house, or to fix this house, to renovate it, are wrong, and that they need to take a week off in order to reassess the situation and relook at the plans. It is insanely funny, and the way Eddie Murphy goes about getting them to do this is fucking hilarious. My favorite line is when the foreman goes, because Axel Foley's point is, you're building this house with right angles that the owners did not want any right angles. And the foreman goes, what, they want to live in a fucking donut? You expect me to build a fucking donut? He goes, what are you, a fucking art critic? Yeah, if they're paying you and they want to live in a donut, let them live in a donut. It is a really funny scene. And Beverly Hills Cop 2 is filled with moments like that. And again, thanks to the improvement of the script, with the focus being on what made Axel Foley work in the first one, you know, it allows it to build and become a much better second movie. And I think that's what makes it work so well. Beverly Hills Cop 2 is awesome. I would definitely say that it's a better movie than Beverly Hills Cop 1. It's just a better story. It's a lot funnier. Well, not funnier. The comedy is more refined. It's just more well-tuned to be what it's going to be. I think all of the characters are significantly funnier, because, again, now we know... Oh, my favorite running gag. I'll get to the second... But we all know how these characters are supposed to work now and how they're supposed to interact. So we can write them for that. Again, Axel Foley is the big one, but also Rosewood and the other guy, the sergeant, their dynamic is known now. We know how they work, and we know who's who. The sergeant is the classic, you know, old school, about to retire cop, and Billy Rosewood's the young gun who, very innocent, he very by the book kind of young cadet, who happens to love law enforcement and believes in justice. And there's a running gag, and whereas in the first movie Rosewood just came off as awkward, in this one the awkwardness is played up, but not to a degree where it becomes even more awkward. He's so innocent and just kind of like cadetish that we have to use it and make it funny. So here's what they decide to do. We make him a gun freak in this movie, but he doesn't show that in his behavior. So there's this scene near the end where, and they see this early on because Billy has this very kind of like hippie-ish kind of house filled with plants and pets, and he's very, very like, the key of the universe is speaking to me. That kind of thing. But, and this is seated, he just has one Rambo poster sticking out amongst this fucking, like, serene, very hippie-ish atmosphere. One poster that's like, oh, this guy likes violence, of Rambo. And it's just this image of Rambo holding a fucking RPG to the camera. And this is later on, what's the word? Like, paid off on, when they're about to do a raid on an oil refinery where there's illegal gun smuggling going on. And this is the big climax of the movie, the big gunfight. And it's a fantastic gunfight. Where fucking, they're about to go in, they're like, oh, we don't have enough firepower because it's only 3 of us. And Rosewood just opens up the trunk, pulls out 3 pump shotguns, and he's like, I've always wanted to do this. And he takes out this long trench coat and puts it on like he's fucking Charles Bronson. It is an awesome scene. I doubt it would ever be allowed in a modern action movie just because of, you know, recent events in society, in the news and such with guns and how gunners are perceived. But Rosewood just puts this trench coat on, grabs 2 shotguns, goes in there and fucks these guys up. It's a great scene. Again, it's even better because you know it would never happen today. And the running gag of the movie is whenever whenever Rosewood does something that's slightly violent or gun obsessed, either Axel or the sergeant goes, Billy, we need to talk. When he's, like, one scene he pulls out a giant knife, he's got a wall of guns, it's just like, we need to talk later. And in this case, the talking comes from, I've got 2 shotguns, go fuck yourself, I'm gonna blow these fuckers apart, I'm gonna pull out a trench coat. It's a great, great scene. And again, it shows why Beverly Hills Cop 2 is superior to the original, in that everything that worked about the first one is used and amplified, and everything that didn't is refined. The action, the cop story is better, the action is much more spectacular in terms of scope and diversity, in that we've got small gunplay, we've got big gunplay, we've got stunts, we've got car chases, we've got, you know, buildings being destroyed, we got great comedy, we all know the characters now, they're all going to work to their strengths and weaknesses. And then, of course, again, we've got Eddie Murphy as Axel Foley to tie the whole thing together and bring it home. It's fantastic. I think what makes me hesitate to say that it's all around better than Beverly Hills Cop, that it's a better Beverly Hills Cop movie, a better Axel Foley movie, is that it doesn't have the advantage of being the first time we see Axel Foley. The first time Axel Foley is on film. The magic of his first performance is kind of gone. He's still funny, he's still likable, but it's that magic of here is a new kind of comedy and a new kind of action hero you've never seen before. This movie doesn't have it because we all know Axel Foley now. And it kind of reminds me of Superman 1 and Superman 2, where Superman 1 has this great gift of being the first time you see Christopher Reeve play Superman. And it's this magical, whimsical experience. And then you go to, Superman 2, and, he's still great, but that whimsy is gone. That magic of being the first time is gone, and now they've got to actually tell a story, and they do, and Superman 2 is awesome. And then you go to Beverly Hills Cop, and it's the same thing. Almost exactly, because, the first movie, fucking Axel Foley is really, really fun and magical because it's the first time we're seeing him. And you fall in love with this character, and then the second time, you know Axel Foley, you know what he's going to be like, and he's still funny and still great, but it's not that same first time. That charm has gone. But where that magic is gone, the movie compensates by saying, alright, we're going to actually tell a story now. We're going to have good action. We're going to have all this stuff. And not to say that the first movie was bad in that, but it was just lacking. And Beverly Hills Cop 2 succeeds where Beverly Hills Cop 1 fell flat. And that's why it's so good, why I highly recommend it to 80s action junkies. If you never dug into the Beverly Hills Cop franchise, definitely watch Beverly Hills Cop 2, but I would definitely say the first one is worth watching as well. The villain is better, the story is better, Axel Foley is at the top of his game. It's just a great, great movie. That being said, let's get into Beverly Hills Cop 3 very briefly, because I don't want to talk about it that much, because it is insanely boring. And I could not get through it without the help of my good old friends at Phoebe. Scott Mosier and Matt Myra, I re-listened to their commentary, this time with the movie, and it was significantly funnier than when I listened to just the podcast. If you're a Phoebe fan, do that if you didn't the first time, because even if you don't... And watch Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2 first, because, again, they're good movies, but also it enhances, the experience of watching Beverly Hills Cop 3, listening to these guys make fun of it. Beverly Hills Cop 3 is just a fucking sellout of a movie. Eddie Murphy is not funny as Axel Foley. He doesn't seem to be playing Axel Foley. It doesn't feel like a Beverly Hills Cop movie. And I mentioned earlier, one of the big reasons is because there's just no interesting flair in the visuals. It's all just kind of flat, boring 90s. And this is a 90s movie now, not an 80s movie. So we're missing that warm glow of the 80s. And now we're kind of into the dull studio fare of the 90s. And Beverly Hills Cop 3 definitely fucking falls to this. And again, because you've got fucking this very flat visual style where the darks don't pop out as dark and the brights don't pop out as bright. It just kind of all looks flat and lifeless. We've seen it before. And there's no distinction between Beverly Hills and Detroit. It's all the same boring, flat visuals. And I'm just shocked by this, because this is fucking John Landis. John Landis is an insanely good director. More than that, he's an insanely good comedic director. And Beverly Hills Cop 3 is just not funny. It just doesn't have any charm to it. It's just all flat and boring, and it sucks because Eddie Murphy is back as Axel Foley, but he's not funny. And Axel Foley doesn't even seem to be in this movie. The character Eddie Murphy is playing is a boring cop. He's not playing Axel Foley. He's just kind of angry and bloodthirsty in this movie. He doesn't seem to know, and I'm not talking about Eddie Murphy, I'm talking about Axel Foley. Axel Foley in this movie seems to be kind of directionless. He just seems to be going after whatever crime is going on because that's what the screenwriters wanted him to do. And Eddie Murphy plays him as almost just kind of like, you know, directionless. Like, oh, I'm here now. All right, let me go do this and not be funny at it. That's a, you know, and it's weird because this movie should, out of all three of them, should be the most personal for Axel Foley. Because one of the characters who's been in all three gets killed in this movie. His boss, Inspector Todd, gets gunned down in this movie by the villain. And, he fucking goes after him like he'd go after any other criminal. With no finesse, no beauty. Well, no, with no finesse. Beauty is a weird word. With no finesse, no sense of style, none of that shit. It's just Axel Foley. Not even Axel Foley, it's Eddie Murphy playing a cop solving a crime, and it's so boring. It's flat, it's boring, it's not funny. I don't know who Eddie Murphy is playing in this movie, but he's not playing Axel Foley. The music score is also very kind of 90s boring synthesizer action. It's just fucking boring. And I think another key thing in this is that there doesn't seem to be any passion for it. There doesn't seem to be any attempt to build on anything here, because Beverly Hills Cop 2 had this mantra of bigger and better. We're going to make it bigger and better. And it took Beverly Hills Cop 1 and, again, made it bigger and better. 3 is just like, yeah, it's Beverly Hills Cop, kinda. It takes place in Beverly Hills. Eddie Murphy plays a cop in Beverly Hills who comes from Detroit. It's not exactly Axel Foley, but whatever. It's fine. And he's gonna wear the same clothes, and he's gonna do some Axel Foley things, like, I don't know, he's gonna be kind of sarcastic, or at least mildly rebellious. I would not call Axel Foley sarcastic in this movie. There are no moments in this movie where he does the major thing that Axel Foley is Axel Foley for. There's no big scene where he tells an elaborate lie to get what he wants. Axel Foley literally walks into an amusement park and is unable to get in because he doesn't have an appointment with the head security guard. This is Axel Foley! Okay, second movie, the motherfucker goes into a strip club and is able to convince the establishment that the sergeant that he's hanging around with is President Gerald Ford, and is able to get a bunch of shit for that. It is insane that he is not able to walk into an amusement park and elaborately lie his way into getting in to see the head of security. It's fucking stupid, and it shows you why this movie fails. Because it's a simple thing, and it's embarrassing that out of all characters in fiction, Axel Foley isn't able to do it. The other thing is, this movie just seems to be very fake in being a Beverly Hills Cop movie. I mean, they throw him in the jacket, in the Detroit Lions jacket that we all know fucking Axel Foley for. They put him in the same outfit. They give him a gun. They have Eddie Murphy in the outfit, but it looks like a fucking Halloween costume. It doesn't look like Axel Foley. It looks like Eddie Murphy is like being a Halloween costume of himself. And it's just like, what happened to the charm, man? What happened to the finesse of Axel Foley? It just lacks in every category. I never found myself laughing at any scene. It's just a dumb, stupid 90s studio comedy that happens to be a sequel to two exceptionally good action movies. And it's just embarrassing. It is an embarrassing sequel. It really is, because you take the first two movies, and while the cop story in two is significantly better than one, they both hold up as cop stories. These are cops, and one of them just happens to be exceptionally sarcastic. And in this movie, it seems like a comedy. Well, I'm sorry, that sounds weird. It seems like a cop story designed specifically for comedy. And that's not what the first two movies were. They were cop stories that happen to be funny at points because of the main character. And the third movie is literally just like, yeah, we'll be funny, but we're not going to tell you a good cop story. It's counterfeit running out of a fucking amusement park. You don't get any un-Beverly Hills Cop than that. First one, art gallery designer who's running drugs and guns. Second movie, a string of fucking string of robberies involving gun smuggling. They're cop stories. And then you get to 3, and Beverly Hills Cop 3 reminds me very much so of another 3 that came out not at the same time, but just a couple of years later. Crocodile Dundee 3. I don't know why, but fucking this movie makes me think so much of Crocodile Dundee in LA because it just comes off as that phony studio comedy, uncoincidentally made by the same fucking studio. They both take place in amusement park-like settings. They're both dumb crime stories, very forced, not very engaging. There's no mystery here. It's all very, very set, obvious things. There's no suspense, no nothing. It's just boring, unfunny, very forced cop. Not even cop, it's just fucking crime. And, I mean, counterfeit isn't a mild crime, but the way it's presented, it seems like mild. I do not like this movie. And you know what? I'm not even going to give it the benefit of having a lot of time to defend itself or for me to tear it apart in this review. It's not worth it. Watch the first 2. Excellent action movies, excellent comedies. Eddie Murphy is insanely charming. Skip Beverly Hills Cop 3. Even if you're a completionist, don't watch Beverly Hills Cop 3. Even if you're a completionist, just fucking skip it. The only reason I would say to watch it is if you're going to listen to the Phoebe commentary with Beverly Hills Cop 3. So that's the only reason I would say to watch it. Otherwise, skip it. It's boring. It's not funny, and it's just dumb. That being said, Beverly Hills Cop 1, Beverly Hills Cop 2, definitely watch them. Fantastic 80s action movies. Very, very fun. It's super fun. Pop them in. They're all on Netflix. If you have Netflix, go check them out there. Give them a watch. Laugh your ass off. Enjoy Axel Foley. Just have a good time with them. They're just good action movies, man. There's nothing like a good action movie. And this is a good action movie. There's nothing more beautiful in the world than a good action movie. And these definitely hold up as that. That being said, pop in Beverly Hills Cop, beat the cold weather coming across the U.S., beat the blizzard, and enjoy the wonderment that is 2014, if you can even call it that. So that being said, I think that's all I have to say about the Beverly Hills Cop movies. If you're not into the franchise, I would say give them a watch. They're fun. You can definitely get yourself into it. And just stay warm this winter. Anyway, that being said, I'm Bill Worcester, aka Zazubaar, and all of you motherfuckers have a fine evening. And listen to Demons from Outer Space coming sometime this weekend. And also Sons of Sarazawa podcast also coming sometime this weekend. Anyway, nothing else to say. Thank you very much for watching or listening, whichever one you did. Have a pleasant evening.